In the quiet corners of ancient history, where gods and mortals intertwined, there emerged a rich tapestry of myths that sought to explain the vast mysteries of the world. The myths of ancient Greece and Rome, still echoing through time, serve as windows into the minds of those who lived in an age before science, when the divine was an ever-present force guiding the ebb and flow of life. These stories, both beautiful and strange, were much more than mere tales. They were the heartbeat of ancient cultures, shaping beliefs, guiding behavior, and providing a framework through which people could understand their world. As we take a slow journey through these timeless myths, let's explore not just their origins, but also the deep connection between these stories and the very essence of the human experience. The ancient Greeks and Romans lived in a world where nature was not just a backdrop, but an active participant in the drama of life. Every thunderstorm, every harvest, and every battle was attributed to the will of the gods. It wasn't just the grandeur of the temples or the beauty of the statues that conveyed the divine. It was the everyday experiences of life that were influenced by these unseen forces. To the Greeks, the gods weren't distant, unapproachable figures. They were intimately tied to the lives of mortals, capable of both inspiring greatness and sowing destruction. Their power was unquestioned, but their motivations could often seem just as mysterious as the world itself. Greek mythology is built on a series of interconnected stories, with gods, goddesses, and heroes often crossing paths. The early myths were passed down orally, shaped over time by poets, philosophers, and priests. The most famous of these early works is the Iliad and the Odyssey by Homer, but these were just part of a larger mythological landscape. In a sense, these stories were like a shared language, a common understanding that helped explain the mysteries of life. As we move through these myths, we'll encounter gods of love and war, wisdom and chaos, each with their own distinct personalities and domains. They were all connected by a single, overarching truth. The gods were a reflection of the human experience, both its heights and its depths. Roman mythology, though heavily influenced by the Greeks, added its own distinct flavors. Where the Greeks had a pantheon of gods, the Romans had a blend of gods and deified ancestors, creating a mythology that was more focused on duty, honor, and the power of the state. Roman myths were deeply entwined with the ideals of Roman society, conquest, discipline, and the glory of empire. Yet at their heart, the Romans embraced many of the same themes as the Greeks: love, fate, heroism, and the eternal struggle between good and evil. Both cultures, despite their differences, understood that the gods were not merely figures of worship, but active participants in the grand drama of life. As we begin our exploration, we'll see that these myths are not mere stories to be told by the firelight. They are profound reflections on the nature of existence. The gods were not always kind, and the heroes were not always noble. In these myths, we find the triumph of the human spirit, but also its flaws. Gods, like Zeus or Jupiter, may wield unimaginable power, but they, too, have their weaknesses and desires. Heroes, like Heracles or Hercules, may perform feats of incredible strength, but they, too, are shaped by their flaws and limitations. Even in the face of greatness, they struggle with their own humanity. These stories, woven from the threads of myth, are not just ancient echoes. They remain with us, resonating across centuries. In every culture, we see reflections of these Greco-Roman tales, in literature, in art, and even in our own modern lives. The gods, with all their faults and virtues, remind us of the complex interplay between power and vulnerability. The heroes, with their journeys and trials, show us that even the greatest among us are not immune to the challenges of the world. Through their stories, we are invited to reflect on our own lives, to consider our own battles and triumphs. In this video, we will embark on a journey through these timeless myths, not just to learn about gods and heroes, but to find comfort in their familiarity. As we explore the creation stories, the wars between gods, and the trials of legendary figures, we will also find a deep sense of connection, a reminder that these myths are not just relics of the past, but living stories that continue to shape our world today. The journey through Greco-Roman mythology is, in many ways, a journey inward, towards understanding the forces that shape our lives, our decisions, and our destinies. And so, as we begin this exploration, let us relax into the rhythm of the myths. Let the stories of gods, heroes, and monsters flow gently, like a river winding through a landscape of imagination and history. With each myth, We will discover not only the wisdom of the ancients, but also the eternal truths that speak to us across time. As the myths unfold, we will move from the quiet origins of the universe to the grand, sweeping adventures of the gods and their mortal counterparts. We will witness the creation of the world, the battles of titans, the struggles of heroes, and the tragic love stories that have captured the human imagination for millennia. Each story will offer a moment of reflection, a chance to pause and consider the mysteries of the world around us, as we drift deeper into the timeless landscape of Greek and Roman mythology. In the beginning, there was nothing but chaos, a vast, endless emptiness that stretched as far as the mind could comprehend. There were no stars, no land, no gods or mortals, only the silent void, dark and undisturbed. This primordial chaos, in the midst of ancient Greece, was the very foundation from which all things would eventually emerge. It is said that from chaos came everything, the heavens, the earth, and the first beings who would shape the universe as we know it. The Greek cosmogony begins not with a bang or a creation story of light versus darkness, but with this quiet, undifferentiated void, a space so vast and empty that it held potential for all things yet to come. From this chaos, the first primordial beings came into being: Gaia, the earth, and Uranus, the sky. It was from these two, born from a formless expanse, that life began to take shape. Gaia, the earth, emerged as a solid, grounded entity, representing the fertile soil from which all living things would eventually sprout. She was not simply a passive foundation. She was alive, breathing with the rhythms of nature, a living force that could shape mountains, valleys, and forests with her will. Gaia's vast presence stretched across the world, her body the land itself, fertile and full of potential, giving birth to every plant, animal, and mortal. Uranus, on the other hand, was a sky, immense, distant, and enveloping. He stretched high above Gaia, covering her in a protective embrace, though their relationship was not without tension. Uranus represented the heavens, the ever-changing sky, and the forces of the cosmos. He was both protector and a force of chaos in his own right, for his gaze from above was not always kind. He was the one who watched over the earth, but also the one who could bring about storms and darkness, unsettling the natural balance at times. Together, Gaia and Uranus formed the first great pair in the Greek myths, the earth beneath, the sky above, each balancing the other in their cosmic dance. Gaia, in her abundant nature, gave birth to the first beings, the Titans. The Titans were mighty and powerful, the first true gods of Greek mythology. They were her children, born of her flesh and spirit, each one embodying a different aspect of the world. Some Titans represented the oceans, others the mountains, and still others the very concept of time itself. They were ancient beings, unbound by the limits of human understanding, and they ruled over the world in its earliest days. Among these Titans, there were figures of great significance. Cronus, who would later play a crucial role in the myths surrounding the Olympian gods, and Rhea, his sister and wife, who would bear many of the children who would eventually rise up against him. The names of these Titans have become familiar throughout history, but in the beginning, they were just part of an unspoken order, a quiet force of nature, linked directly to the earth and sky. The relationships between Gaia, Uranus, and their children were complex, as is the case with many myths. They were not perfect, and their actions often created tension in the world they helped shape. Uranus, despite his role as the sky that watched over Gaia, was not always a kind father or husband. In fact, he feared the strength of his own children, the Titans, and so, in a cruel act of jealousy and control, he imprisoned them in the depth of the earth, inside Gaia herself. This act of oppression set the stage for the first great conflict in Greek mythology, the rebellion of the Titans against Uranus. The earth goddess, Gaia, who had given life to her children, was deeply distressed by the actions of Uranus. She could not stand to see her beloved offspring trapped and punished by their father, and so she called upon her sons to rise up and free them from their imprisonment. It was Cronus, the youngest of the Titans, who answered Gaia's call. With a great act of courage and cunning, Cronus overthrew his father, Uranus, casting him down from his throne in the heavens. With his father's fall, the reign of the Titans began, though it was not to last forever. This violent act, while freeing the imprisoned Titans, also set into motion a series of events that would later lead to their downfall. The overthrow of Uranus was a defining moment in the creation of the world, a symbolic shift that marked the transition from the primordial chaos to the organized rule of the Titans. But as with all such shifts in the cosmic order, the balance would not remain undisturbed for long. Cronus, now the ruler of the cosmos, took his place alongside his sister wife Rhea. Together, they ruled over the earth and sky. Yet Cronus, much like his father Uranus before him, was not content with his newfound power. He, too, feared that his own children would one day overthrow him, just as he had done to Uranus. This fear led him to commit a dark and tragic act. Cronus, in his paranoia, swallowed each of his children as they were born, determined to prevent any of them from challenging his rule. Rhea, heartbroken by this, sought to save her youngest son, Zeus, and tricked Cronus by giving him a stone wrapped in swaddling clothes, which he swallowed instead of the child. Thus, Zeus was hidden away, growing in secret, while the other children of Cronus, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon, remained imprisoned within their father's belly. The birth of Zeus and his eventual rise to power marks another pivotal moment in the cosmic narrative, the spark of rebellion against the oppressive rule of the Titans. The stage was set for the eventual war that would shake the heavens themselves, the Titanomachy, the great war between the Titans and the Olympians, which would define the future of the gods and the balance of the universe. But for now, in the quiet after the creation of the world, the universe was still young. Gaia and Uranus, though no longer in harmony, had set in motion the forces that would shape the world for eons to come. Their children, the Titans, would play their parts, both in their time of rule and in their eventual downfall. The conflict between the primal forces of earth and sky, the tension between father and son, would continue to echo through the stories of the gods. The creation of the world, like the world itself, was a story of cycles, of beginnings and endings of creation and destruction, each one feeding into the next. As we listen to these tales, we are reminded that the world was not always as we know it. It was born from chaos, shaped by the forces of nature and the gods, and even the gods themselves were born of that same chaos. It is a reminder that nothing is ever truly static. Everything is in a constant state of flux, whether it's the relationships between the gods or the ever-changing patterns of nature itself. From the void of chaos to the emergence of the Titans and the first rule of the gods, this moment in the creation story invites us to reflect on the interconnectedness of all things, the ebb and flow of life, and the quiet, yet powerful, forces that shape our own lives. In the end, the creation of the world is not just the beginning of a series of divine acts. It is the beginning of a cosmic order that will continue to unfold, influenced by the choices of gods, mortals, and all the forces in between. And as we move forward into the next stories of the gods and heroes, we carry with us the knowledge that the world is never as it seems. It is always in motion, always shaping itself into something new. The Titanomachy, the great war between the Titans and the Olympians, was a conflict that shaped the very structure of the cosmos. It was a battle of unimaginable scale, one that raged not just across the earth, but through the very heavens themselves. To understand the Titanomachy, we must first reflect on the world that existed before the war, an age ruled by the ancient Titans, the children of Gaia and Uranus. These primordial beings were immense in power, their very essence linked to forces of nature, the earth, and the sky. They were the first gods, the rulers of the universe in its earliest form, and their reign was marked by an order that was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. Yet, even within this seemingly unchallenged dominion, there was unease, a whisper of rebellion that could not be ignored. The Titans, though powerful, were not perfect. Their rule was often harsh, marked by oppression and tyranny, especially under the leadership of Cronus. Cronus, the youngest of the Titans, had overthrown his father Uranus to claim the throne of the heavens. But in doing so, he had inherited a fear that his own children would one day do the same to him. This fear drove him to monstrous acts, the most terrible which was the swallowing of his own children as they were born. One by one, the children of Cronus, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon were consumed by their father in an attempt to prevent the prophecy that one of them would overthrow him. Only Zeus, the youngest, was saved by his mother, Rhea, who tricked Cronus into swallowing a stone wrapped in swaddling clothes instead of the newborn god. Zeus, hidden away and raised in secret, would grow to become the central figure in the Titanomachy. His story is one of gradual emergence, of a quiet rebellion that would soon erupt into a mighty struggle for the fate of the cosmos. As Zeus matured, he learned of his siblings trapped within the belly of Cronus, and he swore to free them, to restore order and justice to the universe. The stage was set for the ultimate confrontation. The Titans, ruling over the world for untold ages, would soon face their reckoning at the hands of their own children, the Olympians. The war itself was long and brutal, a battle that seemed to stretch on for eternity. The Olympians, led by Zeus, had the advantage of youth and vigor, but the Titans were no less formidable. The Titans commanded great power over the natural world. They controlled the oceans, the earth, the heavens, and the very fabric of time. Their strength was unmatched, and they were led by powerful figures like Cronus, Atlas, and Oceanus. Yet the Olympians had something the Titans did not: a new order, a new perspective on the cosmos. They were not tied to the old ways, the old fears, and the old cruelties. They represented a future that was dynamic, open, and filled with possibility. It was this fresh vision, embodied by Zeus, that would ultimately tip the scales of the war. As the conflict unfolded, the Titans and the Olympians were joined by various allies, each contributing their unique powers to the battle. The Olympians were aided by the Cyclopes, the one-eyed giants who crafted weapons of incredible power for the gods. Zeus received the mighty thunderbolt. Poseidon was given the trident, and Hades was granted a helmet that made him invisible, allowing him to move unseen among the battlefield. The Titans, in turn, were supported by the monstrous creatures of old, beasts that had long since been banished from the world. They were formidable opponents, but the advantage slowly began to shift in favor of the Olympians. The battle raged on, with the heavens trembling and the earth shaking under the weight of the conflict. Mountains were hurled, rivers ran red with the blood of the fallen, and the sky itself seemed to burn with the fury of the gods. In the midst of this chaos, the gods did not fight alone. They were joined by heroes, mortals, and other divine beings who rallied to their cause, drawn by the promise of a new world order. The gods were not just fighting for power. They were fighting for the future of the universe itself, for a world where justice, balance, and harmony would prevail over fear, oppression, and tyranny. Despite their great power, the Titans were eventually defeated. It was a combination of strength, strategy, and unity that turned the tide in favor of the Olympians. Zeus, in particular, was a figure of incredible resolve, leading his siblings and allies with a determination that matched the very fury of the storm. His leadership was not just a matter of force. It was a matter of belief. Zeus believed in the new order, in the promise of a world where the gods would be free from the cycle of fear and vengeance that had defined the rule of the Titans. He believed in a world where justice and fairness would reign, where power would be tempered by wisdom. When the war was finally won, the Titans were cast down from their thrones. Cronus, the father who had once ruled the heavens, was imprisoned in the deepest part of the underworld. Far from the light of the world he had once commanded. The other Titans, too, were cast into Tartarus, the darkest and most terrifying part of the underworld, where they would remain for eternity, forever separated from the world they had once ruled. Their fall marked the end of the old order, the closing of a chapter in the history of the gods, and the beginning of a new era under the reign of the Olympians. In the aftermath of the war, Zeus and his siblings took their rightful places as the rulers of the cosmos. Zeus became the king of the gods, Poseidon ruled over the sea, Hades presided over the underworld, and the goddesses Demeter, Hera, and Hestia each took their places in the pantheon, wielding their own domains of influence. Together, they formed a new order, a pantheon of gods who would govern the world with fairness, wisdom, and strength. But even as the Olympians rose to power, they were forever marked by the war. The Titanomachy had shaped them, tested their strength, and forged their bonds. The scars of the conflict would never fade, and the memory of the Titans, their enemies, would linger in the minds of the gods for generations to come. The Titanomachy was more than just a war. It was a cosmic shift, a realignment of the universe. It represented the struggle between the old and the new, the past and the future, between the ancient powers that had governed the world and the emerging forces that would shape the destiny of gods and mortals alike. The war was not simply a battle for power. It was a battle for the very soul of the world. And in the end, it was the Olympians, with their vision of a balanced, just, and harmonious universe, who emerged victorious. As we reflect on the Titanomachy, we are reminded that the conflict between power and fear, control and freedom, is a theme that echoes throughout mythology and life itself. It is a reminder that even in the most violent and chaotic struggles, there is a potential for renewal, for the creation of a new order. The Titanomachy, though a story of war and destruction, ultimately gave birth to a new era, an era where the Olympians would reign, and the world would be shaped by their ideals. It is a myth that teaches us that even in the face of overwhelming odds, the forces of change and justice can prevail, reshaping the world in their image. Zeus, the youngest of the 6 children of Cronus and Rhea, emerged from the shadows of the Titanomachy as the king of the gods, the ruler of Mount Olympus, and the guardian of order in the cosmos. His story is one of perseverance, cunning, and the steady rise of a figure who would come to embody both the power of the heavens and the wisdom required to rule. Zeus, with his thunderbolt in hand and his will unshakable, would establish a new reign, one built on justice and the protection of balance. But his ascent was not without its complexities and trials. As a child, Zeus was hidden from his father Cronus, who, fearful of the prophecy that one of his children would overthrow him, swallowed his offspring at birth. Zeus' mother, Rhea, desperate to save her youngest son, tricked Cronus by giving him a stone wrapped in swaddling clothes instead of the newborn Zeus. While Cronus, unaware of the deception, swallowed the stone whole, Zeus was secretly raised by nymphs on the island of Crete, away from his father's watchful eyes. Here, the future king of the gods grew strong and wise, nurtured by the gentle hand of the earth and the care of those who saw potential in him, even before he fully understood the scope of his destiny. Zeus, however, was destined for more than just a quiet life in the shadows. As he grew older, the time came for him to confront his father, to challenge the tyrannical reign of Cronus, and free his imprisoned siblings. In the depths of the earth, his brothers and sisters, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon, were trapped, swallowed by their own father. With determination in his heart, Zeus began his journey to free them, knowing that his success would mean not just his victory, but the restoration of balance in the cosmos. But Zeus' rise to power was not just an act of rebellion. It was a calculated struggle for justice, for a world that would no longer be ruled by fear. He sought the help of the Titans' old enemies, the Cyclopes, who had been imprisoned by Cronus. In gratitude for his release, the Cyclopes forged 3 powerful weapons for the Olympians. To Zeus, they gave the thunderbolt, a weapon that would become his symbol of authority and power. To Poseidon, they forged a trident, which would allow him to command the seas. And to Hades, they crafted the helm of darkness, which granted him the ability to become invisible. With these divine gifts in hand, Zeus was ready to confront his father and end the reign of the Titans once and for all. The conflict between Zeus and Cronus marked the turning point in the cosmic battle, the moment when the old order was shattered and a new one began to take shape. In a great struggle, Zeus and his allies fought against Cronus and the Titans, culminating in the Titanomachy, the war that would forever change the balance of power. With the defeat of the Titans, Zeus and his siblings took control of the heavens, the earth, and the seas, each ruling over their respective domains. Zeus, as the eldest, became the supreme ruler of the gods, overseeing not just the divine realm, but also the mortal world. However, Zeus' reign was not simply one authority. It was also one responsibility. As the king of the gods, he bore the heavy burden of ensuring the balance of nature, maintaining order in the universe, and ensuring the protection of mortals. His power was immense, but it was tempered by wisdom and a deep understanding of justice. In this way, Zeus was not merely a ruler of power. He was a ruler of principle, a king who believed that his position came with a sacred duty. Zeus' role as king, however, was not without its challenges. His relationships with the other gods were complex, and while he was respected for his power, he was often criticized for his actions, especially when it came to his relationships with mortal women. Zeus' affairs, both with goddesses and mortals, were numerous and infamous. His infidelities, particularly with mortal women, often sparked conflict and jealousy among his wife Hera and other gods. Hera, in particular, was known for her intense jealousy and anger toward Zeus' lovers, a tension that frequently caused strife on Mount Olympus. Despite this, Zeus' position as king remained unshaken. His authority was unquestionable, and his role as protector of order continued to define his reign. Zeus was not just a figure of authority. He was also a god of justice. He was the one who maintained the laws of hospitality, ensuring that guests were treated with respect and that promises were kept. Zeus was also the god of oaths, and he took the keeping of promises seriously, punishing those who broke their word. In this way, Zeus' rule extended beyond the divine realm. It reached into the lives of mortals as well. He was the enforcer of cosmic law, ensuring that those who lived in accordance with the natural order would be rewarded, while those who violated it would face his wrath. Despite his many qualities, Zeus was not without flaws. He was known for his temper, and his wrath could be as fearsome as his thunderbolt. He was also deeply proud, and his pride sometimes led to conflict. Zeus was not above showing favoritism to certain mortals or gods, and his actions, while often justified by a sense of justice, were not always seen as fair by others. However, even in his anger, Zeus never lost sight of the greater good, the balance that he sought to maintain in the world. One of the most significant events during Zeus' reign was the creation of the Olympic Games. These games, held every 4 years in honor of Zeus, became a symbol of peace and unity for the ancient Greeks. The Olympics were not just a display of athletic prowess. They were a reminder of Zeus' power to bring people together in a spirit of harmony and respect. Through these games, Zeus' influence reached far beyond Mount Olympus, uniting the Greek world in a celebration of his greatness and the ideals he represented. As the king of the gods, Zeus was also the god of the sky and the weather. He controlled the thunder, the lightning, and the rain, and his mood was reflected in the heavens themselves. When Zeus was angry, storms raged, and the heavens would be filled with thunder and lightning. When he was at peace, the skies would clear, and the world would bask in sunshine. His control over the natural world was absolute, and his presence was felt in every storm, every calm day, and every change in the weather. Zeus' rule was not a static one. It was a dynamic, evolving reign that adapted to the changing needs of the world. He was both a figure of immense power and a god who understood the importance of balance. As king of the gods, he was not just a ruler of the heavens, but also a protector of mortals. His role in shaping the world, maintaining order, and ensuring justice was central to the very fabric of existence. Through his wisdom, his strength, and his unyielding determination, Zeus established a reign that would last for generations, a reign that would influence not only the gods of Mount Olympus, but also the lives of the mortals who looked to the heavens above. The legacy of Zeus is one of power tempered by wisdom, of a ruler who understood the responsibility that came with his authority. Though his reign was not without its struggles and imperfections, Zeus remains a central figure in Greek mythology, the king whose decisions shaped the world and whose influence continues to echo through the ages. His story is not just one of divine rule. It is a story of the balance between power and justice, of the complexity of leadership, and of the eternal struggle to maintain harmony in a world that is constantly shifting. Poseidon and Hades, the two brothers of Zeus, were gods whose realms stretched beyond the mortal's reach, each holding dominion over forces of nature that were as vast and mysterious as the ocean and the underworld themselves. While Zeus ruled the heavens and the earth, Poseidon and Hades were the masters of their respective domains. The sea and the underworld, domains that were both as essential and as enigmatic as the forces of life and death. Together, they represented the balance between creation and destruction, life and the inevitable end that awaits all things. Poseidon, the god of the sea, was a figure both powerful and unpredictable. His presence felt in every wave that crashed upon the shore and in the storms that raged upon the open ocean. Born to Cronus and Rhea, Poseidon was one of the Olympian gods who, like his siblings, helped overthrow the rule of the Titans. He was a god who embodied the primal and untamed forces of the natural world, the vast oceans and waters that cover much of the earth. With his trident, Poseidon had the power to stir the seas, to calm the waters, or to summon storms that would drown ships and ravage coastlines. He could create earthquakes with a mere strike of his trident, and his anger could shake the very foundations of the world. Poseidon was a god of great strength, yet he was also deeply connected to the ever-changing nature of the sea. Just as the sea could be calm and peaceful one moment and violent and destructive the next, so too was Poseidon's temperament. He was not a god of order like Zeus, nor was he as dark and silent as Hades. Instead, Poseidon's power was dynamic, constantly shifting between moments of beauty and terror. He had the ability to create magnificent islands and harbors, and yet he could also send monstrous creatures to rise from the depths of the sea, such as a terrifying kraken or the hideous sea serpents that threatened sailors. Though he was often viewed as a protector of sailors and those who depended on the sea for their livelihood, Poseidon's moods were capricious, and his wrath could be as fierce as any storm. In contrast to Poseidon's lively and ever-changing domain, Hades, the god of the underworld, ruled over a realm that was far more still, silent, and permanent. While Poseidon's world was fluid and in constant motion, Hades presided over the land of the dead, a place where the souls of mortals would eventually journey after their lives had ended. Hades was not the god of death itself, for that role was filled by Thanatos, but he was the keeper of the dead, the ruler of the shadowy realm beneath the earth. His domain was dark and foreboding, a place where the souls of the departed lingered in a state of eternal rest, where time seemed to move differently and nothing ever truly changed. Hades was often misunderstood by mortals. Unlike other gods, he was not known for his grand deeds or for any particular acts of heroism. He did not wander the earth, interacting with humans or gods alike. Instead, he was a solitary figure, rarely leaving his dark domain beneath the earth. His role as a ruler of the underworld was vital, however, for it was Hades who ensured that the souls of the dead were properly guided to their final resting places, either to the peaceful realm of the Elysian fields or to the dark, endless expanse of Tartarus, where the wicked were punished for their misdeeds in life. Though Hades was often seen as a grim and distant god, he was not evil. In fact, he was far from it. He did not delight in death or suffering. Rather, he simply fulfilled his duty. The underworld was a necessary part of the cosmic order, for death, like life, was a natural part of existence. Hades kept balance in the world by ensuring that no soul escaped the underworld, and that each one received its due. In this sense, Hades was a god of order in his own right, though his realm was one that was far removed from the life-giving forces of the earth or the heavens. He was a god of quiet inevitability, maintaining the flow of life and death without interruption. While Zeus and Poseidon were often seen as the more active and dynamic gods, ruling over the heavens and the sea, Hades' power lay in the preservation of balance after death. It was he who ensured that the dead were not forgotten, that their souls were not lost in the chaos of existence. His quiet, steady presence in the underworld was just as essential to the functioning of the universe as the thunderous reign of Zeus or the restless power of Poseidon. Without Hades, the underworld would become a chaotic and unstable realm, and the cycle of life and death would be disrupted. Despite their contrasting realms, Poseidon and Hades shared a deep bond of kinship. Both were sons of Cronus, and both were part of the generation of gods who would overthrow the Titans and reshape the world. After the defeat of Cronus and the Titans, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades drew lots to divide the world among themselves. Zeus took the heavens, Poseidon claimed the sea, and Hades was given the underworld. Though each god ruled over his domain, the three brothers were not rivals in the same way that Zeus and Cronus had been. Instead, they were partners in a cosmic balance that could only exist through their cooperation. However, the relationship between Poseidon and Hades was not always without tension. Poseidon, with his tempestuous nature and vast domain, was a god who was often seen as the more active of the two, commanding the sea and creating new lands. Hades, on the other hand, remained in the shadows, a silent figure who had no interest in the affairs of the living or in acquiring new realms. His focus was entirely on the dead and maintaining order in the underworld. While Poseidon sought the creation of new lands and seas, Hades ruled over a realm that was fixed and unchanging, a place where nothing new could be born. Despite these differences, the brothers were bound by a shared understanding of their roles in the cosmos. They both knew that the world needed each of them. Poseidon's seas were essential for life, providing food, transportation, and trade for mortals, while Hades' underworld ensured that the natural cycle of life and death remained intact. Without the oceans and the underworld, the world would fall into chaos. It was this understanding that helped maintain the balance of the universe, even if the brothers did not always see eye to eye on matters of power and influence. Poseidon and Hades were both gods who wielded tremendous power, yet their dominions were vastly different in nature. Poseidon's realm was fluid, unpredictable, and life-giving, while Hades was still, somber, and eternal. Both, however, were essential parts of the cosmic order. Their roles intertwined in a delicate balance that ensured the continuation of life and the acceptance of death. Together, these two brothers, each with their own domain, maintained the harmony of the world, their influence stretching across the seas and into the depths of the earth. In the end, Poseidon and Hades remind us that the forces of life and death, creation and destruction, are not opposites but complementary. Just as the sea is both a source of nourishment and a place of danger, so too is the underworld both a place of rest and a reminder of the inevitability of death. Through their roles as rulers of these realms, Poseidon and Hades show us that balance is not achieved through the absence of conflict, but through the understanding that all things must coexist in harmony, no matter how different their natures may be. Hera, the eldest daughter of the Titans Cronus and Rhea, stands as one of the most complex and powerful figures in Greek mythology. As the queen of the gods, she ruled over Mount Olympus with both grace and authority, a goddess whose presence was felt in every marriage, every union, and every familial bond. Yet, despite her status as a consort of Zeus, Hera's story is one marked by both immense power and profound sorrow. Her realm was one of harmony and order, but it was also one of jealousy and heartbreak, as she navigated the challenges of being married to a god who was infamous for his many infidelities. Hera's role as a goddess of marriage, childbirth, and family made her a central figure in the lives of mortals. To the Greeks, marriage was sacred, a bond that was both divine and earthly, and it was Hera who oversaw this most important of unions. Those who sought to marry would pray to her for her blessings, hoping for a union that would be fruitful, loving, and enduring. Hera, with her regal demeanor and deep connection to the ideals of commitment and loyalty, was the goddess who ensured that marriages were respected and upheld. Her role as a protector of marriage made her one of the most revered deities, particularly among women, for she represented the ideals of fidelity and the strength of family bonds. Yet, Hera's marriage to Zeus was far from perfect, despite their divine status. Their relationship was fraught with tension, much of which stemmed from Zeus's countless affairs with mortal women and goddesses alike. Time and time again, Hera was forced to endure the humiliation of her husband's infidelities, and her reaction to these betrayals was often one of fierce jealousy and wrath. Hera's anger at Zeus's actions is one of the defining features of her character. Her jealousy led her to punish not only the women with whom Zeus had affairs, but also the children born of those unions. This aspect of Hera's personality, her intense desire to maintain control over her marriage and the purity of the family, would often shape her interactions with both gods and mortals. Her jealousy and anger, however, should not be seen merely as vengeful. They reflect a deeper sense of justice, a desire to preserve the sanctity of marriage and the family structure that was so integral to both the divine and mortal worlds. In this way, Hera's actions, though often harsh, were rooted in her belief in the sanctity of her marriage to Zeus, a bond that she sought to protect at all costs. Yet, it was this very devotion to her marriage that led to much of her unhappiness, for Zeus, despite his many promises of fidelity, could never truly be bound by the same sense of loyalty that Hera held so dear. Hera's jealousy is perhaps most famously exemplified in her treatment of the mortal woman, Leto. When Leto became pregnant with twins, Apollo and Artemis, by Zeus, Hera, consumed by rage, forbade Leto from giving birth anywhere on earth or on the sea. Leto, unable to find a place to give birth, eventually sought refuge on the floating island of Delos, where she gave birth to her twins. Hera's actions were but one of many instances where her wrath was unleashed upon those who, in her eyes, had wronged her or threatened her marriage. Yet, it was not just the mortal women whom she punished. Hera's anger often extended to her own children, especially those who were born of Zeus's extramarital affairs. One of the most tragic figures in Hera's mythos is Heracles, the greatest of the Greek heroes, who was born of Zeus and the mortal woman Alcmene. Hera, in her fury, sought to make Heracles' life as difficult as possible, subjecting him to 12 seemingly impossible labors. These labors, meant to break Heracles and demonstrate his mortality, instead became a testament to his strength, resilience, and determination. Hera's relentless pursuit of vengeance against Heracles, even though he was an innocent child in all of this, speaks to the depth of her jealousy and her unwillingness to forgive Zeus's indiscretions. Despite Heracles' trials and suffering, however, he ultimately triumphed, and Hera, in a rare moment of compassion, accepted him into the ranks of the gods after his death. Hera's relationship with her own children was equally complex. Although she was a goddess of marriage and motherhood, her relationships with her offspring were often strained. Her most famous children were Ares, the god of war, and Hebe, the goddess of youth. Ares, in particular, was often at odds with his mother, a god whose violent and destructive nature clashed with Hera's ideals of peace and order. While Hera was fiercely protective of her children, her overbearing nature often led to conflict. Her children, caught in the tension between their mother's expectations and the realities of the divine world, often found themselves in roles that did not align with Hera's vision of harmony. Hera's role as a goddess of marriage also placed her in direct opposition to the gods and goddesses who represented love in its more spontaneous and chaotic form. Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty, was often a rival of Hera's, particularly because Aphrodite's influence led mortals to fall in love in ways that were unpredictable and uncontrolled. While Hera sought to preserve the sanctity of marriage, Aphrodite embodied the passion and desire that could tear marriages apart. The relationship between these two goddesses, one representing the structured and the other the free-spirited nature of love, was a reflection of the broader tension between order and chaos that permeates much of Greek mythology. Despite her jealousy and her sometimes harsh methods, Hera was not without her virtues. She was a goddess of great beauty and strength, a protector of women and the sanctity of the family. Her authority as queen of the gods was unquestioned, and her role in maintaining the balance of the divine world was indispensable. Hera was also known for her wisdom and her ability to see the larger picture, often offering counsel to both gods and mortals alike. While she could be vengeful, she was also capable of great generosity and compassion, especially to those who had proven themselves loyal to her. In the end, Hera's character serves as a reminder of the complexity of love, loyalty, and power. Her story is one of struggle, both with her own emotions and with the forces that threaten to disrupt the divine order. Hera's jealousy, while often destructive, also stemmed from her desire to preserve what she believed was sacred, her marriage and her family. Her story, tragic and beautiful in its own right, speaks to the difficulties that even the most powerful beings must face when they are bound by the complexities of love and devotion. Hera's legacy as queen of the gods is not just one of authority, but the quiet, enduring strength that comes from holding on to the things that matter most, even in the face of betrayal and heartache. Ares, the god of war, is one of the most complex and often misunderstood figures in Greek mythology. As the embodiment of violence, bloodshed, and chaos, Ares was a deity whose very essence was intertwined with the brutality of conflict. He was the son of Zeus and Hera, two of the most powerful figures in the pantheon, but his role was drastically different from that of his divine parents. While his mother Hera represented the ideals of marriage and family, and his father Zeus embodied order and justice, Ares was a god of chaos, destruction, and unrestrained violence. His presence on the battlefield was not one of strategy or honor, but of raw power, bloodlust, and the savage nature of war itself. Ares' relationship with war is not merely symbolic. It is foundational to his identity as a god. Unlike other gods, such as Athena, who was associated with the strategic and intellectual aspect of warfare, Ares represented the mindless brutality of battle, the rage that surged through warriors as they fought, the fear and pain that accompanied the clash of weapons, and the destruction that came with every swing of a sword. He was a figure of terror and frenzy, a god whose mere presence could drive soldiers into a violent frenzy, where the line between friend and foe became blurred in the heat of battle. To the Greeks, Ares was not the noble warrior they admired in their heroes, but the embodiment of war in its most ferocious and unrelenting form. Despite his association with war, Ares was not universally adored by the gods or mortals. In fact, he was often depicted as a figure of fear and disdain. His temper, his unpredictable nature, and his tendency to revel in the chaos of battle made him a divisive figure, even among the other gods. His father, Zeus, was known to disdain Ares' impulsive nature, seeing him as too chaotic and untamed, while his mother, Hera, although she was a fierce protector of her family, did not always show her son the same affection. Ares was not a god who could command the same respect as Zeus, Poseidon, or Athena. In the eyes of many, he was simply a god of destruction, whose presence heralded nothing but suffering and pain. However, despite his less-than-ideal reputation among the gods, Ares was not without his devotees. The ancient Greeks did not view him as a wholly negative force. They acknowledged that war, though tragic, was sometimes necessary. In times of war, Ares was a god who could inspire soldiers with the courage to fight, to endure the pain and fear of battle, and to embrace the violence that might be required to secure victory. For the warriors who fought in the name of their city-state or their gods, Ares was a figure they called upon when they needed the strength to push forward in the chaos of battle. His presence on the battlefield was not one of mercy or compassion, but one of strength and endurance, pushing soldiers to the limits of their abilities. Yet, for all his power and influence, Ares was not a god who brought about lasting peace or resolution. He represented the destructive nature of war itself, the aftermath of conflict, the death and suffering that were its inevitable consequences. He was not concerned with the strategic goals of warfare or the noble ideals that might accompany it. His focus was purely on the act of battle, the violence, and the bloodshed that resulted. Unlike Athena, who represented the wisdom and tactical brilliance needed for victory, Ares was a god who thrived in the chaos of war. His presence signified that reason had left the battlefield, and only rage and brutality remained. Ares was also known for his many romantic escapades, which, in a way, mirrored the chaotic and often destructive nature of his divine realm. Perhaps the most famous of these affairs was his love for Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty. The union between Ares and Aphrodite is a striking contrast, as it juxtaposes the violence and chaos of war with the passion and beauty of love. Despite their vastly different realms, Ares representing war and Aphrodite representing love, the two were drawn together by a shared intensity, a powerful attraction that defied logic. Their affair, however, was not without its complications, as it led to conflict with both the gods and mortals. Aphrodite, though married to Hephaestus, the god of craftsmanship, was not deterred by her husband's presence. Instead, she indulged in her relationship with Ares, a love that was as passionate as it was destructive. The affair between Ares and Aphrodite was, in many ways, a reflection of Ares' character. It was impulsive, reckless, and full of abandon, much like his nature on the battlefield. This relationship, while providing moments of pleasure and passion, was ultimately doomed, for it was driven by forces beyond their control. Just as Ares could never fully control the chaos of war, so too could he not control the passions that led him into his entanglement with Aphrodite. Their love affair was one marked by both beauty and destruction, a reflection of the dual nature of Ares himself, a god who could inspire both the courage to fight and the terror that comes with the aftermath of violence. Despite his less-than-ideal reputation, Ares did have moments of greatness. He was a symbol of the warrior spirit, a god who embodied the will to fight and the courage to face the unknown. His role in Greek mythology is to remind us of the cost of war, not in terms of tactics or strategies, but in terms of human lives and the devastating consequences that come with conflict. Ares is not a god who encourages peace or diplomacy. Rather, he is a god who exists in the space between life and death, between civilization and savagery. He is the god who strips away the veneer of civilization, exposing the raw, primal instincts that lie beneath. In many ways, Ares is a tragic figure. He is a god who exists solely for the purpose of war, but he is also a god who is never fully accepted by the other gods. His thirst for violence, his unpredictable nature, and his lack of diplomacy made him a figure who was both feared and reviled. Yet, in his very existence, Ares serves as a necessary reminder of the darker side of human nature, the side that, when pushed to its limits, is capable of both great destruction and great sacrifice. The warriors who fought in his name knew the cost of battle all too well, and Ares was a god who reminded them of the consequences of their actions. Ares is a god who represents the brutality of war, but also the courage that is required to face it. In a world where the gods are revered for their many qualities, wisdom, beauty, love, and justice, Ares stands apart as a reminder that conflict, though often destructive, is an undeniable part of the human experience. His presence in mythology highlights the tensions between duty and desire, destruction and creation, and the power of the human will in the face of chaos. Ultimately, Ares is not merely the god of war. He is a symbol of the dual nature of conflict, both the terror it brings and the strength it demands. Athena, the goddess of wisdom, strategy, and war, stands as one of the most revered and complex figures in Greek mythology. Unlike many of her fellow deities, Athena represented the intellectual and strategic aspects of conflict, embodying the ideals of wisdom, diplomacy, and justice. While gods like Ares personified the chaotic and brutal nature of war, Athena's approach was far more measured and calculated. She was a goddess who valued intellect, skill, and reason over mere brute strength, and her wisdom was sought after by both gods and mortals alike. Born from the head of Zeus, fully grown and armored, Athena's birth was one of the most unique and symbolic events in Greek mythology. According to the myth, Zeus, after swallowing his first wife, Metis, the goddess of wisdom, learned that he was to father a child who would be even more powerful than he. To prevent this from happening, Zeus swallowed Metis, but she was already pregnant with Athena. As a result, Athena sprang from Zeus's forehead, a divine being who was the epitome of wisdom and strategic thinking. Her birth itself represented a union of intellect and power, and from that moment, Athena was associated with the ability to see clearly, think logically, and act decisively. She was not just a war goddess, but a figure of intellect and fairness, a goddess who saw beyond the surface and understood the deeper currents that shape both human and divine affairs. Athena's role as a goddess of wisdom is central to her character. She represented the kind of knowledge that was practical and grounded, wisdom that could be applied to everyday life, as well as to the grander schemes of the gods. Unlike the abstract knowledge of other gods, Athena's wisdom was about finding solutions, solving problems, and maintaining balance. Her wisdom was often sought by heroes and leaders who needed guidance in their quests, as Athena's intellect was unmatched by any other deity. Her counsel was regarded as invaluable, and many of the greatest heroes in Greek mythology, including Odysseus and Perseus, relied on her insight to succeed in their endeavors. Her wisdom was not limited to warfare and strategy. She also played a role in helping mortals navigate complex social, moral, and intellectual dilemmas. In the realm of war, Athena's influence was equally profound. As a goddess of strategy and warfare, she embodied the more intellectual side of battle. While Ares represented the violence and chaos of combat, Athena represented the discipline, organization, and planning that were essential for victory. Athena was the patron goddess of warriors who relied on skill, tactics, and strategy to win their battles, rather than mere force. She was a protector of cities, the one who guided their defense and ensured that victory was achieved not through mindless destruction, but through wisdom and well-thought-out plans. One of Athena's most famous roles in Greek mythology is her involvement in the Trojan War. It was during this epic conflict that Athena's strategic mind shone through, helping the Greeks achieve victory despite overwhelming odds. Throughout the war, Athena provided guidance to key Greek heroes, including Achilles, Odysseus, and Diomedes. She was the one who devised a plan to build the Trojan horse, a brilliant stratagem that allowed the Greeks to infiltrate the city of Troy and ultimately bring an end to the war. The success of this plan highlighted Athena's role as the embodiment of strategic warfare, showing that intellect and cleverness could triumph over brute force. Beyond the battlefield, Athena was also the goddess of crafts, particularly weaving. This aspect of her character ties into her role as a goddess of civilization and culture, as weaving was an important part of the material culture of ancient Greece. Athena's association with weaving was symbolic of her role in the creation of civilization itself. Just as weaving brought together threads to form a cohesive fabric, so too did Athena's wisdom bring together the various elements of society, justice, intellect, creativity, and power, into a harmonious whole. This connection to the arts also extended to her role as the protector of artisans and inventors, those who used their skills and intelligence to shape the world around them. Athena's role as a protector and defender was central to her identity. She was the patron goddess of Athens, the city that was named in her honor, and she was revered as the city's guardian. In the myth of the founding of Athens, both Athena and Poseidon competed for the title of the city's protector. Poseidon offered the people of Athens a gift of water, a saltwater spring. But Athena's gift was far more practical, the olive tree. The olive tree provided food, oil, and wood, and it symbolized peace and prosperity. The Athenians, recognizing the value of Athena's gift, chose her as their protector, and she became the symbol of their city. The olive tree, which was sacred to Athena, became a symbol of wisdom, peace, and prosperity in the ancient Greek world. Athena's relationship with her father, Zeus, was also unique. While she was one of his children, she was also his closest confidant. Athena was often depicted as Zeus's advisor, a role that allowed her to influence the decisions of the king of the gods. Her wisdom was unparalleled, and Zeus trusted her judgment above all others. Athena's closeness to Zeus also gave her a position of great power within the divine hierarchy. Unlike many of the other gods, who were known for their impulsive behavior and emotional reactions, Athena was a goddess who always considered the consequences of her actions. Her calm, measured demeanor made her a figure of stability and guidance, a contrast to the more unpredictable nature of gods like Ares, Hera, and even Zeus himself. Athena was also known for her virginity, a characteristic that was symbolic of her independence and self-sufficiency. As a virgin goddess, Athena was not bound by the traditional roles of marriage and motherhood. She was a goddess who was wholly devoted to her duties as a protector of cities, a warrior goddess, and a symbol of wisdom. Her virginity was not a sign of coldness or aloofness, but rather an expression of her autonomy. She chose not to marry or bear children because she was focused on her divine responsibilities, and in this sense, she was a goddess who transcended the traditional roles assigned to women in ancient Greek society. Athena's virginity was not just a personal choice. It was a symbol of her power and her commitment to the greater good. In art and literature, Athena was often depicted as a majestic and regal figure, wearing armor and a helmet, with a shield bearing the image of the Gorgon's head. Her appearance was that of a warrior, yet her expression conveyed wisdom and calm. Athena was not just a figure of power. She was a goddess who embodied the qualities of self-control, reason, and strategic thinking. Her image was one of dignity and authority, and she was often shown as a mediator, intervening in the affairs of both gods and mortals to ensure that justice and order prevailed. Athena's legacy as the goddess of wisdom, strategy, and war continues to resonate today. She represents the ideal of the balanced mind, one that seeks knowledge and understanding in all things. Athena was not a goddess who reveled in destruction or chaos. Instead, she sought to bring order to the world, to ensure that conflicts were resolved with intellect and reason. Her wisdom was a guiding light for those who sought her counsel, and her influence extended far beyond the battlefield, shaping the course of history and the lives of those who followed her teachings. Athena remains a symbol of the power of the mind, the importance of strategic thinking, and the enduring value of wisdom in the face of adversity. Apollo, one of the most beloved and versatile gods in Greek mythology, was a figure who embodied many aspects of life and the divine. As the god of the sun, music, prophecy, and healing, Apollo's influence stretched across many domains, and he was considered one of the most important deities in the Greek pantheon. His presence was felt in the fields of art, knowledge, and health, and his attributes made him a symbol of harmony, balance, and enlightenment. Apollo's role as the sun god connected him to light, truth, and the ability to illuminate the minds of both gods and mortals. But his multifaceted nature extended far beyond just these associations, making Apollo a figure whose reach covered many facets of the ancient world. Apollo was the son of Zeus and Leto, and his twin sister was Artemis, the goddess of the hunt. From the moment of his birth, Apollo was destined to be a powerful and influential god. According to myth, Leto, his mother, was pursued by the jealous Hera, who forbade her from giving birth on any land that was touched by the sun. Leto, in her desperate search for a safe place to give birth, eventually found a floating island of Delos, where Apollo was born. As soon as he emerged, Apollo was said to be immediately capable of walking and talking, marking him as a god of extraordinary strength and beauty. This dramatic birth, in a place isolated from the rest of the world, set the tone for Apollo's later association with illumination, both literal and intellectual. As the god of the sun, Apollo was responsible for driving the chariot of the sun across the sky every day, bringing light to the world. His daily journey from the eastern horizon to the western edge of the sky was both a literal and symbolic act, signifying the cycles of day and night and the eternal rhythm of time. Apollo's power over the sun also connected him to the concept of order, as the predictable rise and fall of the sun was seen as a sign of cosmic stability. In this sense, Apollo was not only a god of light, but also a god of justice and clarity. His role as the sun god gave him the ability to reveal hidden truths, to illuminate what was dark or uncertain, and to bring enlightenment to both gods and mortals. Apollo's role as a god of music is perhaps one of his most celebrated aspects. He was often depicted playing a golden lyre, an instrument that became synonymous with his image. The lyre, a gift from the god Hermes, allowed Apollo to create melodies that were so beautiful they could charm the gods, the animals, and even inanimate objects. Music was seen as a divine gift, and Apollo's mastery over the lyre made him the patron god of musicians and artists. In addition to his musical talents, Apollo was also associated with the Muses, the 9 goddesses of inspiration, who were often depicted alongside him in myth. The Muses, each representing a different art form, were said to inspire creative individuals, and Apollo, as their leader, was considered the ultimate patron of the arts. Through his connection with music, Apollo represented the harmony and balance that could be achieved through artistic expression. Music was seen not only as entertainment, but as a form of communication with the divine, a way for mortals to reach beyond the material world and connect with the transcendent. Apollo's lyre was not simply a symbol of his artistic ability. It was a representation of the divine order and beauty that could be created through art. In many ways, Apollo was a god who brought civilization to life, for he embodied the creative force that transformed the world from chaos into something structured and meaningful. Another of Apollo's significant roles was as the god of prophecy and oracles. He was a divine overseer of the famous Oracle of Delphi, where mortals would travel from far and wide to seek his wisdom. The oracle, located at the Temple of Apollo in Delphi, was one of the most important religious sites in ancient Greece. The Pythia, the high priestess of the temple, would enter a trance-like state, often induced by vapors from the earth, and deliver Apollo's prophecies to those who sought them. Apollo was believed to speak through the Pythia, offering guidance on everything from personal matters to matters of state and war. His prophecies were highly respected, as he was considered a god who had the ability to see the future and understand the hidden workings of the universe. Apollo's role as a god of prophecy also extended beyond Delphi. He was the one who could foresee events, both great and small, and his visions could be both uplifting and terrifying. In many myths, Apollo's prophecies were sought by kings, warriors, and other powerful figures who needed to know their fates. Yet, Apollo's prophecies were often cryptic and required careful interpretation. His ability to see the future did not mean that he provided clear answers, but rather that he offered guidance that could help mortals navigate the uncertainties of life. This made Apollo a god who was associated with both wisdom and ambiguity. For even though he could reveal the truth, that truth was often complex and open to multiple interpretations. In addition to his roles as the sun god, god of music, and god of prophecy, Apollo was also a god of healing. He was often depicted as the bringer of both disease and cure, for he had the power to both send plagues upon mortals and to heal them when they were sick. Apollo's healing abilities were deeply connected to his role as the god of order and balance. For health, like the sun, required a delicate balance between opposing forces. Apollo's ability to heal was also reflected in his association with medicine. His son, Asclepius, the god of healing, inherited many of Apollo's abilities and became the patron deity of doctors and healers. Apollo's healing powers were also linked to his musical abilities, as music was thought to have a therapeutic effect on both the body and the soul. His music could both soothe and invigorate, just as his healing powers could restore balance and health to those in need. Despite his many roles and powers, Apollo was not without his flaws and challenges. One of the most famous myths involving Apollo centers on his love for the nymph Daphne. According to the myth, Apollo fell in love with Daphne, but she rejected him, choosing instead to remain a virgin. In his pursuit of Daphne, Apollo chased her relentlessly, and just as he was about to catch her, Daphne prayed to her father, the river god Punnius, to save her. In response, Punnius transformed Daphne into a laurel tree, which became Apollo's sacred tree. Apollo, heartbroken by this transformation, made the laurel tree a symbol of his unrequited love, and became a symbol of both his victory and his sorrow. This myth highlights Apollo's vulnerability, for despite his many talents and divine status, he was still subject to the whims of love and fate. It also underscores one of the most poignant aspects of Apollo's character, his deep capacity for emotion, even in the face of his immense power. His love for Daphne and his inability to win her heart contrasts sharply with his usual role as a god who possesses control over so many aspects of life. It is a reminder that even the greatest gods must confront the forces of love, desire, and loss. Apollo's legacy in Greek mythology is one of enlightenment, beauty, and balance. As the god who illuminated the world with his sun, Apollo also illuminated the minds of those who sought knowledge, artistic inspiration, and divine insight. Through his music, prophecy, and healing, he brought order to a chaotic world, offering both guidance and relief to those who sought his aid. Apollo stands as a figure of intellect, creativity, and compassion, a god whose influence touched many aspects of human life, from the arts to the understanding of the universe itself. His story is one of beauty, wisdom, and the eternal struggle to find harmony between the forces of nature and the divine. Artemis, the goddess of the hunt, wilderness, and the moon, is one of the most revered and independent figures in Greek mythology. Often depicted as a fierce and untamable force of nature, she was a protector of both animals and women, and a guardian of the wild places of the world. Artemis was the daughter of Zeus and Leto, and the twin sister of Apollo. From the moment of her birth, she was destined to be a powerful and autonomous figure, a goddess who embodied the virtues of freedom, strength, and independence. While her brother Apollo was associated with light, reason, and civilization, Artemis was a goddess who ruled the untamed wilderness and the hidden mysteries of the natural world. As the goddess of the hunt, Artemis was known for her skill with the bow and her ability to track and hunt the most elusive creatures. She was often depicted carrying a bow and quiver, accompanied by a pack of hunting dogs, and her presence in the forests and mountains was a sign of both strength and solitude. Unlike many of the other gods, Artemis was not interested in the power struggles of the gods, or the pursuit of glory through conquest or war. Instead, her focus was on the natural world and the creatures that inhabited it. Artemis was a goddess who hunted not for sport, but as a means of maintaining the balance of nature, ensuring that the cycles of life and death in the wild remained undisturbed. Artemis' connection to the wild and the untamed was not limited to her role as a huntress. She was also a goddess who embodied the primal and unspoiled aspects of nature itself. Her domain was the forest, the mountains, and the wilderness, places that were untouched by civilization and where the laws of nature prevailed. Artemis was a guardian of these sacred spaces, and she protected both the land and the creatures that inhabited it. Her relationship with animals was particularly important, as she was seen as a protector of the creatures of the wild. In many myths, she was known to transform into an animal herself, symbolizing her deep connection to the natural world. She was also the patron goddess of young women, particularly those who lived in rural areas, and was considered a symbol of purity, strength, and independence. Artemis' virginity, one of the most important aspects of her character, reinforced her image as an independent and self-sufficient goddess. Unlike many of the other female deities in Greek mythology, Artemis had no interest in marriage or romantic relationships. She was a goddess who rejected the traditional roles of womanhood, choosing instead to remain unattached and focus solely on her duties as a protector of the wild. Her virginity was not seen as a sign of coldness or aloofness, but rather as a symbol of her autonomy and her refusal to be bound by the expectations of others. In this sense, Artemis stood apart from the other gods, particularly from goddesses like Hera, who was defined by her marriage to Zeus, and Aphrodite, whose role was tied to love and attraction. Despite her fierce independence, Artemis was also known for her compassion and her ability to offer protection and guidance to those in need. She was a goddess who could both defend and nurture, offering her assistance to mortals who sought her help. For example, in the myth of the Caledonian boar hunt, Artemis sent a giant boar to ravage the land of Caledon because the king Zeus had neglected to offer her proper sacrifices. However, when the mortal hero Meleager killed the boar, Artemis rewarded him for his bravery, showing that while she could be vengeful, she was also fair and just in her dealings with mortals. In this way, Artemis was a goddess who balanced both the nurturing and destructive aspects of nature, embodying both the calm serenity of the moon and the fierce power of the hunt. Artemis' role as the goddess of the moon was another important aspect of her character. In Greek mythology, the moon was often associated with femininity and the cycles of nature, and Artemis, as the moon goddess, was seen as a symbol of the changing phases of life. Just as the moon waxes and wanes, so too did Artemis' influence extend over the cycles of life, from birth to death. As the goddess of the moon, Artemis was also linked to the concept of time, particularly the passage of time that governed the natural world. The cycles of the moon marked the changing of the seasons, the growth of crops, and the rhythms of life and death. Artemis' presence in the night sky was a sign of both beauty and mystery, a reminder of the ever-turning wheel of time. Artemis was also a goddess who was intimately connected to the concept of protection. She was known for her role as a guardian of young women, especially those who were in the early stages of life. As a protector of women, Artemis was a deity who watched over girls as they reached the age of puberty, guiding them through the difficult transition into adulthood. Her protective nature extended to the realms of childbirth as well, for Artemis was often called upon to aid women during labor. In many ways, Artemis was a goddess who bridged the gap between childhood and adulthood, offering both a symbol of purity and a guide to the stages of life. Her role as protector of young women was also evident in her association with the city of Ephesus, where she was worshipped as the great mother goddess. At Ephesus, Artemis was often depicted with multiple breasts, symbolizing her role as the nurturer and protector of life. In this city, Artemis was not only a goddess of the hunt and wilderness, but also a figure who provided security and care to those in need. Her temple at Ephesus, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, was one of the most important religious sites in the ancient world, and it stood as a testament to her importance as a guardian of life and the natural world. Artemis' relationships with other gods were often characterized by a sense of independence and self-reliance. While she was closely linked to her twin brother Apollo, Artemis was not defined by her familial relationships. She was a goddess who stood apart, focused on her own domain and her own power. Unlike other gods who were often embroiled in complex relationships and rivalries, Artemis was a solitary figure, content with her own company and the company of the animals and women she protected. She was not one to seek out attention or admiration, but rather, she commanded respect through her actions and her unwavering dedication to her role as protector of the wild. However, Artemis was not immune to conflict, and there were moments in mythology where her wrath was unleashed. One of the most famous instances of Artemis' fury occurred when she punished the hunter Actaeon. In the myth, Actaeon, while hunting the woods, stumbled upon Artemis while she was bathing. Offended by his intrusion and disrespect for her privacy, Artemis transformed Actaeon into a stag, and he was subsequently hunted and killed by his own dogs. This myth highlights Artemis' fierce sense of personal space and her readiness to protect herself from any perceived threat or disrespect. It also serves as a reminder of the dangerous and unpredictable side of the goddess, who could swiftly change from a nurturing protector to a vengeful force. Throughout her myths, Artemis is consistently portrayed as a figure of strength, independence, and justice. Her connection to the wilderness, her role as a protector of young women, and her association with the moon all contribute to her identity as a goddess who governs a natural order. She was not a goddess who sought power or recognition, but rather one who quietly and steadfastly fulfilled her duties. Artemis embodies the untamed forces of nature, representing the beauty and the danger that exists in the natural world, and she remains a symbol of autonomy, strength, and the protective power of the wild. Hermes, the god of travelers, thieves, and communication, is one of the most dynamic and multifaceted figures in Greek mythology. He was a god who existed in the liminal spaces between the mortal world and the divine realm, a messenger who traversed the boundaries of both. With his winged sandals and caduceus, the staff of peace and negotiation, Hermes was a figure who could move freely between realms, carrying messages to the gods, guiding souls to the underworld, and even aiding mortals in their quests. As the patron deity of travelers, merchants, and thieves, Hermes represented a unique blend of intelligence, agility, and cunning, embodying the virtues of wit and resourcefulness that allowed him to navigate the complexities of both divine and mortal worlds. Hermes was the son of Zeus and the nymph Maia, and his birth was as extraordinary as his character. Born in a cave on Mount Cyllene, he was said to have been an incredibly clever child from the very moment of his birth. In one of his earliest myths, Hermes, still a newborn, was able to escape his cradle and steal Apollo's sacred cattle. He cleverly disguised his theft by driving the cattle backward, making it appear as though they were walking the opposite direction. This early demonstration of his cunning and wit set the tone for his later role as the god of thieves, tricksters, and anyone who needed to use their wits to survive in a world filled with challenges. Hermes' ability to think quickly and act decisively was one of the qualities that made him such a unique and essential deity. Despite his association with theft and mischief, Hermes was not a god of pure chaos or destruction. Instead, he was a deity of transition and communication. As a messenger of the gods, Hermes was responsible for carrying important messages between the gods and humans. He had the ability to move freely between realms of the living and the dead, serving as a guide of souls to the underworld. He led the dead to the afterlife, ensuring that their passage was swift and without obstruction. In this role, Hermes was a figure of great importance, for he maintained the flow of communication between the realms, allowing the gods to impart their will to mortals and ensuring that the souls of the deceased reached their final resting places. One of Hermes' most iconic attributes is his winged sandals, which allowed him to travel swiftly and effortlessly. These sandals symbolize his role as a messenger, carrying him across vast distances in the blink of an eye. Hermes' ability to travel between worlds and move at great speed also represented the fleeting nature of life and the constant motion that defines both the mortal and divine realms. His swiftness, both in his physical movements and in his ability to communicate, made him a god who could transcend the boundaries of time and space. He was always on the move, never tied to one place for long, and this constant motion reflected his role as the bringer of messages and the harbinger of change. Hermes was also known as the god of commerce, trade, and boundaries, overseeing the exchange of goods and ideas between different peoples and cultures. In this sense, he represented the fluidity of human interactions and the connections that could be made between different communities. As a god of merchants, Hermes was associated with prosperity and success in business endeavors. He was seen as a patron of those who sought to make a living through their wit, charm, and cleverness, traits that were often more valuable than physical strength or wealth. Merchants, traders, and anyone involved in the exchange of goods looked to Hermes for guidance and favor, knowing that his influence could help them navigate the complexities of the marketplace and the unpredictable nature of trade. Beyond his associations with commerce, Hermes was also the god of boundaries and transitions. He was a deity who presided over the space between one thing and another, whether it be between life and death, day and night, or the mortal and divine realms. Hermes was a god of thresholds, and his presence was often invoked when someone was crossing from one phase of life to another, whether it was a traveler embarking on a journey or a soul passing from the world of the living to the underworld. In this sense, Hermes was a god of both beginnings and endings, guiding those who ventured into the unknown and ensuring that they made the transition with ease. Another aspect of Hermes' character was his association with fertility and the protection of boundaries. As a god of travelers, Hermes was believed to protect those who were journeying far from home, ensuring that they reached their destination safely. He was also a protector of the borders of cities, preventing outsiders from entering without permission. In some myths, Hermes was depicted as a figure who could change his appearance at will, allowing him to slip through barriers and boundaries with ease. This ability to move in and out of spaces made him a god who was both elusive and ever-present, a deity who could be both seen and unseen, depending on the needs of the moment. One of the most fascinating aspects of Hermes' character is his role as a god of trickery and mischief. He was a god who could use his wit and cleverness to outsmart even the most powerful beings. Hermes was often depicted as a trickster figure, using his intelligence and charm to navigate difficult situations and achieve his goals. However, his mischief was not always harmful. In many myths, Hermes' tricks were harmless or even beneficial, helping to resolve conflicts or bring about favorable outcomes. For example, in one myth, Hermes helped the hero Perseus by giving him the tools he needed to defeat the monster Medusa, including a reflective shield and a pair of winged sandals. In this sense, Hermes was a god who used his cunning for the greater good, helping mortals and gods alike to achieve their objectives through intelligence and resourcefulness. Hermes' trickster nature also made him a god of communication, for he was the one who could speak with both gods and mortals, translating messages and ideas between realms. His ability to understand and interpret the needs and desires of others allowed him to serve as a mediator, smoothing over conflicts and facilitating negotiations. As a god of communication, Hermes was revered for his ability to bring people together, fostering understanding and cooperation between different groups. Whether through diplomacy, persuasion, or his clever use of words, Hermes was a master communicator who could navigate the complexities of human relationships with ease. One of the most famous myths involving Hermes is his role in helping create the first lyre. According to the story, Hermes crafted the lyre from the shell of a tortoise and gave it to Apollo as a gift. Apollo, initially displeased with Hermes' trickery, was soon enchanted by the sound of the lyre and forgave Hermes for his earlier misdeeds. This myth highlights both Hermes' skill as a craftsman and his ability to charm others with his wit and creativity. It also underscores his role as a bridge between different worlds, the mortal and the divine, the serious and the playful, the practical and the artistic. Despite his many associations with trickery, Hermes was not a god of pure chaos. Rather, he was a figure who embodied the principles of cleverness, communication, and transition. He was a god who moved through the world with ease, navigating boundaries and obstacles with grace and intelligence. Hermes was a figure who could bring order to confusion, using his wit and charm to resolve problems and bring people together. In this way, he served as a reminder that intelligence and resourcefulness are often more powerful than brute strength, and that the ability to communicate and navigate the world with finesse is a divine gift. Hermes' legacy in Greek mythology is one of versatility and adaptability. As the god of travelers, thieves, and communication, he occupied a unique and essential role in the pantheon. His influence extended across many aspects of life, from trade and commerce to diplomacy and the afterlife. Hermes was a god who moved fluidly between worlds, guiding souls, delivering messages, and helping mortals achieve their goals. His quick-wit, resourcefulness, and charm made him a beloved and necessary figure in both the mortal and divine realms. He remains a symbol of the power of communication, intelligence, and the ability to navigate the complexities of the world with skill and grace. Ares, the god of war, bloodshed, and strife, stands as one of the more controversial and often misunderstood deities in Greek mythology. Unlike the strategic Athena or the disciplined Apollo, Ares embodies the raw, chaotic, and destructive aspects of war. His presence was not associated with noble causes or just battles, but rather with the violence, disorder, and carnage that war often brings. As a figure who represented the brutality of conflict, Ares was feared and respected, but also deeply disliked by both mortals and gods. His character was often seen as a personification of war's darker side, senseless violence, hatred, and bloodlust. Ares was the son of Zeus and Hera, two of the most powerful gods in the Greek pantheon. However, his relationship with his parents was far from harmonious. While Zeus, the king of the gods, was a figure of authority and order, Ares represented the chaotic and destructive side of the divine. In many myths, Ares' aggressive nature clashed with the more rational and strategic aspects of his family, particularly with Athena, his sister, who was a goddess of wisdom, war strategy, and peace. Athena's calm and calculated approach to war stood in stark contrast to Ares' bloodthirsty and impulsive nature. While Athena sought to bring victory through intelligence and planning, Ares thrived on the chaos and carnage of battle, relishing in the violence and destruction that it brought. Despite his violent nature, Ares was not without his supporters. He was revered by soldiers and warriors who sought his favor in battle. To them, Ares represented the strength and courage required to face the horrors of war. In times of conflict, Ares was called upon to grant favor to those who sought victory through sheer force. Warriors often invoke his name as they went into battle, hoping that his power would bring them success. However, it is important to note that Ares' influence was often more destructive than beneficial. While warriors sought his strength, they often found themselves ensnared by the bloodlust that he encouraged. Ares did not care for the righteousness of a cause. For him, war was about domination and power, a brutal force that could consume both gods and mortals alike. Ares' role as a god of war was not limited to the battlefield. He was also a god of strife and discord, influencing the underlying tensions that led to war in the first place. Ares thrived on chaos, and he often instigated conflict for no reason other than to see the destruction that it caused. He was a deity who stirred up the emotions of hatred, jealousy, and fear, inflaming the passions of mortals and gods alike. It is said that Ares delighted in sowing discord among the people, pushing them toward violence and aggression. His role as a god of strife meant that he was involved in the breakdown of peace, the erosion of alliances, and the collapse of order. He was a force that could undermine stability and cause division, his very presence inciting conflict and chaos wherever he went. In contrast to other gods of war, Ares was not a god who was concerned with the outcome of battle or the strategic elements that might lead to victory. He was not interested in the diplomacy or negotiation that might resolve conflict. Instead, Ares represented the mindless violence that often accompanies war, the destruction of life for the sake of power. In many ways, Ares was the embodiment of war's most brutal and inhuman aspects. While Athena was a goddess who sought to end wars with justice and wisdom, Ares thrived on the suffering and bloodshed that war caused. His connection to the more primal aspects of combat made him a figure who was feared for his unpredictability and ruthlessness. Despite his dark nature, Ares was not without his moments of vulnerability. One of the most famous myths involving Ares centers on his love affair with Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty. According to the myth, Ares and Aphrodite had an illicit affair, one that was discovered by her husband, Hephaestus. In his anger, Hephaestus created an intricate trap that ensnared the two lovers in a net, exposing their infidelity to the other gods. While Ares was usually a symbol of strength and power, this myth revealed his vulnerability, showing that even the most fearsome of gods could be humiliated by their emotions. This story also highlights the contrast between Ares and Aphrodite. While Ares represented the violent, destructive aspect of life, Aphrodite represented love, beauty, and the pursuit of harmony. The pairing of these two gods was a reminder that even in the world of the gods, love and violence often existed in opposition to one another. Ares also had a tumultuous relationship with other gods. He was particularly disliked by the other Olympians, who often saw him as a disruptive force. Even his father, Zeus, who was no stranger to war and conflict, had a complicated relationship with Ares. Zeus acknowledged Ares' power and importance, but he did not share his enthusiasm for the carnage that Ares brought with him. Ares' reckless nature and his lack of consideration for the consequences of war made him a god who is often seen as a necessary evil. His presence was accepted as part of the cosmic order, but he was never truly embraced by the other gods. The disdain that the other gods felt for Ares was evident in many myths. One such myth involved the Trojan War, where Ares played a significant role. Despite being a central figure in the conflict, Ares was portrayed as a god who was easily manipulated by the whims of the other gods, and he often acted impulsively, without regard for strategy or consequence. Ares' involvement in the Trojan War showed how unpredictable and dangerous he could be. His actions often led to more destruction and suffering rather than providing any real advantage to either side. His lack of foresight and reckless behavior made him a volatile force, and his actions often served to escalate the conflict rather than resolve it. Another important aspect of Ares' character is his association with the concept of honor in battle. While Ares represented the brutality and violence of war, his presence was also linked to the ideals of bravery and courage. In ancient Greek society, warriors were expected to display honor and strength in battle, and Ares was seen as a symbol of those virtues, albeit in their most extreme form. However, the idea of honor in battle as represented by Ares was often intertwined with a sense of vanity and pride. Ares, in his relentless pursuit of power, was often depicted as a god who cared more for his own glory than for the greater good. His desire for victory at all costs led him to become a symbol of the dangers of unchecked ambition and the consequences of pursuing power without regard for justice or morality. Despite his reputation as a god of war, Ares was not a god who was universally worshipped or revered. His temples were few, and his cult was not as widespread as those of other gods. While other gods like Athena and Apollo were celebrated for their wisdom, beauty, and cultural contributions, Ares was primarily associated with destruction and chaos. In this sense, Ares represented the darker, more destructive forces of nature and human nature, and his presence in Greek mythology serves as a reminder of the darker side of war, the senseless violence, the loss of life, and the suffering that accompany it. Ares' legacy in Greek mythology is a complex one. As the god of war, bloodshed, and strife, he represents the violence and chaos inherent in conflict. His character serves as a reminder of the destructive nature of war, highlighting its capacity to consume not only the lives of those who engage in it, but also the very ideals of justice and honor. Ares is a figure who, despite his strength and power, is ultimately a tragic one. His unchecked rage and thirst for destruction lead to his alienation from the other gods, and his involvement in war only deepens the suffering of those around him. While he may be revered by warriors seeking strength in battle, Ares is also a symbol of the brutal cost of war, a god whose very essence serves as a warning about the dangers of violence unchecked by wisdom or reason. Hera, the queen of the gods, is one of the most powerful and influential deities in Greek mythology. As the goddess of marriage, family, and childbirth, she embodies the sanctity and challenges of these aspects of human life. Her role as the wife of Zeus, the king of the gods, placed her at the very center of the divine realm, and her influence extended over the domestic sphere of both gods and mortals alike. Hera was deeply associated with the institution of marriage, the protection of women, and the nurturing of children, making her one of the most revered figures in Greek religious life. Yet, despite her elevated status and her responsibilities, Hera's mythology is also marked by personal struggles, particularly in her tumultuous relationship with her husband, Zeus. Hera's parentage traces back to the Titans, as she was a daughter of the Titans Cronus and Rhea. This made her one of the Olympian gods who emerged from the overthrow of the Titans, and her royal lineage was reflected in her regal demeanor and her elevated position among the gods. Her marriage to Zeus was not one of mutual love, but rather a union of power and influence. The story of their marriage is filled with both divine drama and the complexities of their partnership. Zeus, known for his many infidelities and numerous romantic entanglements with mortals and goddesses alike, often caused Hera immense suffering with his unfaithfulness. This dynamic between the two gods, her constant suffering due to Zeus' extramarital affairs, and her attempts to retain control over her own role and dignity as a queen, forms the core of many of Hera's myths. Despite Zeus' transgressions, Hera's role as the goddess of marriage remained central to her identity. She was often invoked by brides and grooms seeking her blessing for a harmonious and enduring marriage. In a society where marriage was seen as a sacred institution, Hera's influence was paramount. Her power extended not only to the divine realm, but also to the mortal world, where her favor was sought by women hoping for strong, loving marriages and fertile unions. Hera was thought to bless those who honored the sanctity of marriage, and her worship often centered around ensuring protection and welfare of the home and family. One of Hera's most important roles was as the protector of women during childbirth. In ancient Greece, the process of giving birth was fraught with danger, and women relied on the favor of gods like Hera to ensure a safe delivery. As the goddess who presided over childbirth, Hera was seen as a divine midwife, a protector of both the mother and the child. Many of Hera's temples were located in areas where women gathered to pray for fertility and to ask for divine intervention during the pregnancy and birth process. The goddess' connection to fertility and the well-being of mothers and children made her an essential figure in the lives of many Greeks, particularly those who face the trials and dangers of childbirth. However, Hera's personality and mythological actions were not confined to her role as a maternal protector. She was also a goddess of jealousy, anger, and vengeance. The myths of Hera often depict her as a deeply passionate and sometimes vengeful figure, particularly in her reactions to Zeus' affairs. In her jealousy, Hera was known to inflict suffering on the women with whom Zeus had relations, punishing them and sometimes their children. One of the most famous stories is that of Heracles, the great hero, whose birth was a result of one of Zeus' many affairs. Hera, in a fit of jealousy, attempted to kill Heracles as an infant by sending serpents to his cradle. However, Heracles, even as a baby, displayed immense strength and managed to kill the serpents, foreshadowing his legendary heroism. Another of Hera's most well-known acts of revenge was her pursuit of Io, a mortal woman with whom Zeus had fallen in love. In order to hide his infidelity from Hera, Zeus transformed Io into a cow. Hera, however, was not fooled and demanded that the cow be given to her. She placed the transformed Io under the watch of Argus, a giant with 100 eyes, to ensure that Zeus would not come to her. Eventually, Zeus sent Hermes to rescue Io, but Hera's vengeance continued when she sent a gadfly to torment the cow, causing her to wander for years in agony. This myth exemplifies Hera's complex nature. While she could be a nurturing figure, she could also be a goddess of immense wrath, particularly when her honor and marriage were threatened. Hera's relationship with Zeus was also marked by her constant attempts to maintain her dignity and status as the queen of the gods. Despite her husband's many affairs, Hera remained devoted to her own authority and power, and she often sought ways to assert her dominance. In several myths, Hera attempted to maintain control over Zeus, using her cleverness and wit to outmaneuver him. One such myth involves Hera's attempt to punish Zeus by binding him in chains while he slept, only to be tricked by the god into releasing him. This story highlights the complexity of their relationship. While Hera was powerful and resourceful, she was also often subject to Zeus' superior strength and cunning. While Hera's actions were often driven by her jealousy and sense of injustice, she was also a goddess of great dignity and pride. Her divine beauty and regal bearing made her one of the most revered goddesses in the Greek pantheon, and she was often depicted wearing a crown and seated on a throne, symbolizing her authority and stature. In art, she was often shown in the company of peacocks, which were sacred to her and symbolized her role as the queen of the gods. The peacock, with its vibrant and eye-catching feathers, was seen as a reflection of Hera's own majesty and grace. Despite the complexities of her character, Hera's role as the goddess of marriage and family remained central to her identity. Her influence was felt deeply in the lives of both mortals and immortals, and her worship was widespread throughout the ancient Greek world. Many cities and communities had shrines and temples dedicated to her, and festivals were held in her honor. The most famous of these festivals was the Hera, a celebration held in Olympia, where women would compete in athletic events in honor of the goddess. These festivals were a testament to Hera's role as protector of women, and a symbol of the strength and unity that marriage and family could bring. Hera's connection to the domestic sphere made her an important figure in the daily lives of ancient Greeks. As the goddess who presided over the sanctity of marriage and family, Hera was seen as a guardian of the home. Her influence extended to matters of fertility, childbirth, and the well-being of children, making her a vital deity for those hoping to secure the health and prosperity of their families. Her protection over women, particularly during pregnancy and childbirth, ensured her place as a deity who was intimately tied to the cycles of life and death, both in the divine realm and the mortal world. Yet, Hera's role was not just as protector and nurturer. She also embodied a more challenging and difficult aspect of family life. She represented the struggles and conflicts that arose within relationships, particularly in her own marriage to Zeus. Her jealousy and anger, though often destructive, also demonstrated her passion and devotion to maintaining the integrity of her marriage and the power that she wielded as queen of the gods. In this way, Hera was a complex figure, a goddess who symbolized both the beauty and the turmoil that can arise in marriage and family life. Her legacy in Greek mythology is one of both reverence and complexity. As a goddess of marriage, family, and childbirth, Hera played an essential role in the lives of mortals and gods alike. Her nurturing qualities were revered, and her ability to protect women and children made her an indispensable figure in the ancient world. At the same time, her jealousy and vengeful nature added a darker layer to her character, highlighting the complexities of human relationships and the challenges of maintaining love and loyalty in a world filled with temptations and strife. Hera remains a symbol of both the strength and fragility of marriage, family, and the bonds that connect individuals in both divine and mortal realms. Demeter, the goddess of the harvest, agriculture, and fertility, stands as one of the central deities in Greek mythology. She is a figure of profound significance, embodying the natural cycles of growth and decay, life and death, and the delicate balance that sustains life on earth. As the goddess who presides over fertility of the earth, Demeter's role was essential to the survival and prosperity of the ancient Greek people, for it was she who provided the sustenance that nourished them. Her relationship with the natural world and her close connection to the cycle of seasons made her a figure of both reverence and awe, representing both the abundance of the earth and its capacity for renewal and destruction. Demeter was the daughter of the Titans Cronus and Rhea, and like many of the Olympian gods, her power and influence were forged in the aftermath of the great battle between the Titans and the Olympians. After the defeat of the Titans, Demeter, along with her siblings, assumed her place in the pantheon of gods who ruled over the world. As the goddess of the harvest, Demeter was primarily concerned with the fertility of the earth, the growth of crops, and the nourishment of humanity. Her domain was not just the fields and gardens, but the very foundation of life itself, for it was her blessings that allowed for crops to grow and the earth to yield its fruits. Without Demeter, there would be no harvest, no food, and no life to sustain the mortals who inhabited the world. The most famous myth associated with Demeter is the story of her daughter, Persephone, and her abduction by Hades, the god of the underworld. This myth explains the changing of the seasons, as Demeter's grief and mourning for her daughter were said to cause the earth to fall into winter. The myth begins when Persephone, the beautiful daughter of Demeter, is abducted by Hades while she is picking flowers in a field. Hades, taken by her beauty, carries Persephone away to his realm in the underworld, and Demeter, devastated by the loss of her daughter, searches for her relentlessly. As Demeter searched the world for Persephone, she neglected her duties as the goddess of the harvest. The earth became barren, crops withered, and famine spread throughout the land. The gods, seeing the suffering of the mortals and the devastation of the earth, intervened. Zeus, the king of the gods, sent Hermes to the underworld to bring Persephone back. However, before she could return, Persephone had eaten 6 pomegranate seeds in the underworld, and as a result, she was bound to the realm of the dead for a portion of each year. According to the myth, Persephone would spend 6 months of the year with Hades in the underworld, and the other 6 months with her mother Demeter on earth. It was during the time that Persephone was with Hades that Demeter mourned, causing the earth to grow cold and barren. This became the winter season. When Persephone returned to her mother, the earth would come alive again, and the spring and summer seasons would follow. This myth encapsulates the central aspects of Demeter's character: her nurturing and protective love for her daughter, her deep connection to the cycles of the earth, and the way in which life and death are intertwined. Demeter's grief, caused by the separation from Persephone, is symbolic of the deep connection between the earth's fertility and the cycle of life and death. When Persephone is absent, the earth goes dormant, much like the death of the crops during winter. However, when Persephone returns, the earth is renewed and the cycle of life begins anew, representing the arrival of spring and a return of abundance. In addition to her role as the goddess of the harvest and fertility, Demeter was also revered as a protector of the sanctity of marriage and the home. As the goddess of agriculture, Demeter's blessings were not only essential for food production, but also for prosperity of families and communities. In ancient Greece, agriculture was a cornerstone of life, and the harvest was a time of great importance. Demeter's presence in the lives of the Greeks was felt most strongly during the growing season, and her influence extended to all aspects of agricultural life, from planting and tending crops to ensuring a bountiful harvest. Farmers would offer sacrifices and prayers to Demeter to ensure that their fields would yield abundant crops, and to seek her favor in times of drought or poor harvests. Demeter was also a goddess who embodied the relationship between humans and nature. She was a deity who encouraged the cultivation of the earth and the nurturing of the land, recognizing that humanity's survival depended on the harmony between nature and labor. In this way, Demeter was not just a goddess of the harvest, but a goddess who represented the cycle of life itself: growth, decay, and rebirth. Her power lay in the earth's ability to regenerate, to give birth to new life after the old has passed away. This connection to nature and the earth's fertility made Demeter a deeply grounding figure in the Greek pantheon, symbolizing profound relationship between the divine and the mortal, and between the human race and the world they inhabited. Despite her association with abundance, Demeter was also a goddess who understood the hardships of life. The story of her grief over Persephone's abduction highlights the pain and loss that comes with the passage of time. While Demeter's nurturing qualities were celebrated, her sorrow reminded the Greeks that the cycles of life are not always smooth or easy. Just as the earth must undergo a period of dormancy in the winter, so too must humans experience loss and hardship. Demeter's power, however, lay in her ability to transform that sorrow into something that was part of a greater cycle, a cycle that eventually led to renewal and growth. The cyclical nature of life, where death and loss are followed by rebirth and growth, was a core tenet of Demeter's influence. The Eleusinian Mysteries, one of the most famous religious rituals in ancient Greece, were dedicated to Demeter and Persephone. These rites were centered around the myth of Demeter's search for her daughter, and the mysteries symbolized the promise of life after death. Initiates into the Eleusinian Mysteries were believed to be granted knowledge of the secrets of life, death, and rebirth, and the cult of Demeter played a vital role in helping to explain the mysteries of human existence. The mysteries were not just about agricultural cycles, but also about the personal journey of the soul, a journey that mirrored the death and rebirth of the seasons. The worship of Demeter was widespread in ancient Greece, and her influence was particularly strong in rural areas, where her blessings were most needed. Farmers, in particular, saw Demeter as a divine figure who provided for their families and ensured the survival of their communities. Her worship was also important in the context of marriage and childbirth, for Demeter was thought to bless couples with children and to ensure fertility of the land. Her temples were places of both agricultural and spiritual significance, and they were seen as centers of both physical and emotional sustenance. Demeter's legacy in Greek mythology is one that represents the fundamental relationship between humanity and the natural world. As the goddess of the harvest and fertility, she is the embodiment of the earth's nurturing and regenerative powers, and her influence was integral to the survival and prosperity of both mortals and gods. The myth of Demeter and Persephone serves as a powerful reminder of the cyclical nature of life, where periods of loss and grief are followed by renewal and growth. Demeter's connection to agriculture, fertility, and the cycles of life made her a goddess who was not only revered by the Greeks, but also deeply respected for the way in which she symbolized the enduring power of the earth and the natural world. Through Demeter, the ancient Greeks understood that life, death, and rebirth were inseparable, and that the cycles of nature mirrored the experiences of humanity. Her influence was felt in the abundance of the harvest, in fertility of the land, and in the relationships that sustained families and communities. As a goddess who protected the earth's fertility and guided the cycles of nature, Demeter remains a symbol of the sustaining power of life and the nurturing qualities of the earth, reminding us that, just like the seasons, there is always a cycle of renewal and hope. Poseidon, the god of the sea, earthquakes, and horses, stands as one of the most formidable and complex deities in Greek mythology. As one of the 12 Olympian gods, he held a significant place in the divine hierarchy, second only to his brother Zeus, the king of the gods. Poseidon's dominion over the seas and all that dwell within them made him a powerful and unpredictable force of nature. His connection to earthquakes and horses also added to his aura of raw, uncontrollable power. As a god who could command the depths of the ocean, summon storms, and cause the earth to tremble, Poseidon was both revered and feared by the ancient Greeks. His domain extended far beyond the human world. He had control over the tides, the storms, and the creatures that live beneath the waves. Poseidon's parentage traces back to the Titans, as he was the son of Cronus and Rhea. Like his siblings Zeus and Hades, Poseidon played a crucial role in the overthrow of their father, Cronus, and the Titans. After the victory, the three brothers divided the cosmos between themselves, with Zeus taking the sky, Hades ruling the underworld, and Poseidon claiming the seas. Poseidon's realm was vast, covering not only the oceans and seas, but also the rivers, lakes, and all bodies of water. The mighty god was also associated with horses, having created the first horse from the sea foam, and he was believed to be the patron of horse racing and chariot races. This connection to horses further reinforced his status as a god of power, speed, and untamed energy. Poseidon's most iconic symbol is a trident, a three-pronged spear that he wields to control the oceans, calm or stir up storms, and even create earthquakes. The trident was not just a weapon, but a representation of Poseidon's control over the natural forces of the earth. It is said that with a single strike of his trident, Poseidon could cause the seas to swell or the land to quake. The weapon symbolizes immense power and his ability to shape the world around him, both in subtle ways and through catastrophic events. The trident became a symbol of Poseidon's authority, and his mastery over the seas and earthquakes gave him a place among the most revered and feared gods in Greek mythology. As the god of the sea, Poseidon was responsible for all maritime activities and was worshipped by sailors, fishermen, and anyone whose livelihood depended on the ocean. He was seen as a protector of ships and sailors, and his favor was crucial for safe passage across the seas. In times of stormy weather or rough seas, sailors would offer sacrifices to Poseidon, praying for his mercy and for a safe return home. Poseidon was not a god who could be easily appeased, however, and his moods were as unpredictable as the sea itself. While he could be generous and offer calm seas, he could also be wrathful and destructive, causing terrible storms and shipwrecks if he was angered. Poseidon's unpredictability was central to his nature. As the god who ruled the vast and mysterious ocean, he was a deity whose temper was closely tied to the forces of nature. It is said that Poseidon's mood could shift with the tides. On calm days, the sea would be peaceful and serene, but on stormy days, Poseidon would unleash his fury, sending waves crashing against ships and shores. This duality of Poseidon's nature, the calm and the tempestuous, reflected the broader contradictions inherent in the natural world. The sea, like Poseidon, could be a source of life, bringing fish and sustenance, but it could also be a force of destruction, swallowing ships and drowning sailors. Poseidon embodied both the nurturing and the terrifying aspects of nature, and his power over the sea made him one of the most important gods for the ancient Greeks. Beyond his role as the god of the sea, Poseidon was also associated with earthquakes. The ancient Greeks believed that earthquakes were caused by Poseidon's trident striking the earth, and they attributed the violent tremors and quakes to his wrath. In many myths, Poseidon is depicted as causing earthquakes to punish mortals or to assert his power. The very foundation of the earth was subject to Poseidon's will, and his ability to make the ground shake beneath the feet of both gods and mortals demonstrated the vastness of his dominion. Earthquakes were seen as a reminder of Poseidon's uncontrollable strength, and they were often interpreted as signs of his displeasure. However, just as Poseidon could cause destruction, he could also calm the earth, and it was said that he had the ability to restore stability and peace after a tremor. This power over the earth made Poseidon a god who was not only associated with the sea, but also with the deeper, more primal forces of the world. Another important aspect of Poseidon's domain was his connection to horses. As the god of horses, Poseidon was often associated with the creation and taming of these majestic creatures. In one myth, it is said that Poseidon created the first horse by striking the sea with his trident, causing the waves to foam and give birth to the creature. This connection to horses further reinforced Poseidon's status as a deity of power and strength, for horses were symbols of speed, nobility, and grace. In ancient Greece, horses were integral to chariot races and warfare, and Poseidon's favor was seen as essential for victory in these competitions. He was often worshipped by athletes and warriors, who sought his blessings for success in horse-related events. Poseidon's role as a god of horses also made him a patron of those who worked with horses, such as horse trainers, breeders, and charioteers. While Poseidon's dominion over the sea and earthquakes was absolute, his relationships with other gods and mortals were often marked by rivalry, pride, and conflict. Poseidon was known for his competitive nature, and many of his myths involve struggles for power and dominance. One of the most famous stories that highlight Poseidon's rivalry is his contest with Athena over the patronage of the city of Athens. Both gods desired to become the patron of the city, and they agreed to present gifts to the people of Athens to determine who would be chosen. Poseidon, in his characteristic impulsiveness, struck the earth with his trident, creating a saltwater spring. While this was a symbol of his power over the sea, it was not a practical gift for the people. Athena, on the other hand, offered the olive tree, a symbol of peace and prosperity. The people of Athens, recognizing the value of Athena's gift, chose her as their patron, and Poseidon's defeat in this contest left him bitter and resentful. The story exemplifies Poseidon's competitive nature and his desire for dominance, traits that were frequently evident in his interactions with other gods. Poseidon's role in mythology was not just that of a powerful and fearsome god, but also that of protector and benefactor. While he was capable of unleashing destructive forces, he was also a god who could be called upon for help, especially by sailors, farmers, and those who relied on the seas for their livelihoods. However, his favor was not easily won, and those who sought his assistance had to approach him with respect and reverence. Poseidon's moods were as unpredictable as the sea itself, and his blessings could come as swiftly as his wrath. The ancient Greeks understood this duality in their god, and their relationship with Poseidon was one of both awe and caution. His power was immense, but so too was his unpredictability. As the god of the sea, earthquakes, and horses, Poseidon's influence extended beyond the world of the Greeks. His power over the oceans and the earth made him a deity of global significance, representing forces of nature that were both awe-inspiring and terrifying. His myths, which often feature themes of rivalry, competition, and uncontrollable power, highlight his role as a god who embodied the most primal forces of the world. In worshipping Poseidon, the Greeks sought to understand the unpredictable nature of the world around them, and they acknowledged that, just as the sea could be calm one moment and stormy the next, so too could the gods bring blessings or curses, depending on their whims. Poseidon's legacy is one of raw power, strength, and the ever-changing nature of life itself, a reminder that the forces of nature can both sustain and destroy. Apollo, the god of the sun, music, poetry, and prophecy, holds a distinguished place in Greek mythology. One of the most multifaceted and revered figures in the ancient pantheon, Apollo embodies both the beauty and the complexity of the divine. He is a god who balances both the light of the sun and the shadow of prophetic knowledge, the harmony of music with the foresight of destiny. Apollo's domain stretches across many aspects of human existence: arts, wisdom, healing, and even the eventual end of life. His vast influence touched all areas of life, from the mundane to the spiritual, and his worship spread across the ancient world. Apollo's symbolism as a god who represents both creation and destruction gives him a unique and powerful role in Greek mythology. Apollo is the son of Zeus, the king of the gods, and Leto, a Titaness. His twin sister, Artemis, is the goddess of the hunt, the wilderness, and the moon. From his birth, Apollo was destined for greatness. His story begins with his miraculous birth on the island of Delos, a sacred place where his mother, Leto, was granted refuge to give birth. It was a difficult delivery, with Leto being pursued by the wrath of Hera, Zeus' wife, who was jealous of Leto's pregnancy. Hera had cursed Leto to wander the earth in search of a place to give birth, and the island of Delos, which had once been a floating piece of land, was transformed into a stable rock at the god's command to offer Leto a safe place. The moment Apollo was born, he was immediately radiant, a god of light from the start, symbolizing both his association with the sun and his brilliance as a divine being. Apollo's connection to the sun is one of his most defining attributes. Often depicted driving a chariot across the sky, Apollo's journey each day was said to bring light to the world, while his descent into the underworld at night marked the return of darkness. In some myths, Apollo's role as a sun god is seen as an embodiment of the constant cycle of day and night, the eternal passage of time. His daily ride across the heavens, pulling the sun with his chariot, represents the eternal and cyclical nature of life itself. Apollo's role in controlling the sun also made him a god of life and death. Just as the sun could bring life to the earth, it could also scorch and destroy with its heat. Apollo's power over the sun made him a figure of immense power, whose influence could either sustain or annihilate. As a god of music and poetry, Apollo is often seen as the embodiment of harmony, balance, and artistic expression. He is depicted as a beautiful, youthful figure with a lyre in hand, a symbol of his musical abilities. According to myth, Apollo was the inventor of the lyre, an instrument that became one of his most recognizable symbols. He was known for his incredible skill as a musician, and the sound of his lyre was said to bring peace and order to the world. Apollo's music had the power to charm not only gods and mortals, but also animals and nature itself. His melodies could calm the wildest storms or bring tranquility to the most restless soul. Apollo was often celebrated as a patron of the arts, inspiring poets, musicians, and artists alike. He was also the leader of the Muses, the 9 goddesses who inspired all forms of artistic expression, further solidifying his role as the divine patron of creativity. In addition to his mastery of music, Apollo was a god of prophecy. He was the patron of the Oracle of Delphi, one of the most important and revered prophetic sites in the ancient Greek world. The Oracle of Delphi was said to be the center of the world, and it was believed that Apollo spoke through the Pythia, a priestess who would deliver cryptic prophecies while in a trance-like state. Apollo's role as a god of prophecy made him a deity who could see the future, often providing guidance to mortals and gods alike. The most famous oracles associated with Apollo include his predictions of war, conquest, and even personal destinies. Apollo's prophetic powers were not always benevolent, as he could also reveal harsh truths or the consequences of one's actions, serving as a reminder of fate's inexorable hold on all beings.